You know, we tend to think of theories as these dry academic things, right? But what if they're not? What if they're actually these incredible tools, like different pairs of glasses, that let us see and make sense of the wild, chaotic world all around us? In this explainer, we're diving into some of the biggest theories in sociology to see just how they try to explain our modern lives. So, let's jump in.
Okay, this image right here, it gets straight to the heart of why theories are so important. We have all this scientific evidence about our climate, but how we interpret that evidence, the story we tell about it, leads to these huge real-world fights. The exact same data can fuel completely opposite conclusions, and that has massive consequences for politics, for the economy, for pretty much everything.
And this isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment. The source material points to this exact quote, where former President Trump basically questioned the whole theory of human-caused climate change. It just goes to show you, these theoretical debates aren't stuck in textbooks. They directly shape public policy and how we talk about the biggest issues we face. It's a perfect example of why getting a grip on different theories really matters.
So where did this whole need for social theories even come from? Well, sociology wasn't born in some quiet, dusty library. No way. It was forged in the absolute fire of revolution. It was created to answer really urgent, practical questions about a world that was changing faster than anyone could possibly keep up with.
Think about it. You had two massive, world-shattering events happen at once. On one hand, the Industrial Revolution just completely turned life upside down. How people worked, where they lived, it created all these new problems like horrible overcrowding in cities and pollution. And then on the other hand, you have the French Revolution, which just shattered old ideas about kings and queens, unleashing these radical new ideals of freedom, liberty, and rights for all. The old world was basically gone, and people desperately needed a new science to figure out this strange new one.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the founding fathers, Marx, Durkheim, and Weber. Then we'll see how their ideas grew into new schools of thought, and, crucially, how they were challenged and made stronger by some really important new perspectives.
All right, let's start with the originals. You can think of Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and Max Weber as the first great architects of sociology. Each one of them looked out at this brand new industrial world and drew up a completely different blueprint to explain how it all worked. First up, Karl Marx. For him, the engine that drives all of human history is conflict, specifically economic conflict. He argued that every society is built on what he called its mode of production, basically how we make stuff. Under capitalism, he said, this creates two main classes that are always at odds: the bourgeoisie, who own the factories and all the capital, and the proletariat, who have nothing to sell but their own labor. For Marx, this wasn't just some feature of society. It was an explosive, unstable conflict that would one day tear the whole system apart.
Now, Emil Durkheim, he came along with a totally different blueprint. He wasn't so focused on conflict. He wanted to know about the invisible glue that holds society together. And he gave us this incredible idea of social facts, things like laws or morality or customs that exist outside of any one of us, but they shape our actions with a force that's as real as gravity. His big idea was that sociology's job was to study these powerful forces that create cohesion.
And here's his really optimistic take on the modern world. Durkheim didn't see industrial society as a disaster waiting to happen. He actually saw the complex division of labor, where a baker needs a farmer who needs a mechanic, as creating a new and even stronger form of social glue. He called it organic solidarity. In his view, the fact that we all depend on each other so much in the modern world actually binds us together more tightly than ever before.
All right, our third architect, Max Weber, asked a totally different and really fascinating question. Why did modern capitalism explode in the West and not somewhere else? His answer wasn't about economics, it was about ideas. He traced it all the way back to certain Protestant beliefs, specifically Calvinism. The idea of predestination, that your fate in the afterlife was already decided, created this deep anxiety. So believers started looking for a sign that they were one of God's chosen, and worldly success, making money, became that sign. This led to this intense work ethic, but also a very frugal lifestyle. So instead of spending their profits on luxuries, they just reinvested them, which unintentionally kickstarted the relentless engine of modern capitalism.
It's an incredible contrast when you put them side by side, isn't it? Marx sees modernity as a story of economic struggle. Durkheim sees it as creating a brand new kind of social glue. And Weber argues it was all driven by the power of new religious ideas and values. Three brilliant minds, three totally different blueprints for the exact same world.
So after those founders, a brand new debate started to bubble up that still shapes sociology today. Is society some giant overarching structure that dictates our lives from the top down, or is it something we create ourselves, moment by moment, from the bottom up? So, on the top-down side, you have thinkers like Talcott Parsons and his school of thought, structural functionalism. They saw society as a really complex system, almost like a living organism. Parsons's famous AGIL scheme argued that for any society to survive, it has to do 4 key things. It has to adapt to its environment, achieve its goals, integrate all its different parts, and maintain its core values over time, what he called latency. In this view, every single part of society, from the family to the government, has a job to do to keep the whole system running.
But then a really powerful counterargument came along. What if all this talk about giant systems and structures is missing the point entirely? What if society isn't some huge machine operating way above our heads, but is actually something that's built and rebuilt every single day by us? And that is the core idea of symbolic interactionism. It completely flips the camera around. It shifts the focus from the big macro-level structures down to the micro-level of our daily face-to-face interactions. For these thinkers, society is just the sum of all our interactions built on the meanings we all agree to give to symbols. Everything from a simple handshake to the word love to a stop sign. We are constantly, actively building our social world every time we talk to each other.
But even with all these amazing debates happening, there was a massive problem brewing under the surface. The classical theories, whether they were focused on big structures or tiny interactions, had these huge blind spots. They were trying to tell the story of humanity while leaving out the experiences of more than half the people.
This quote from the source material, it's an earthquake. Starting around the 1970s, feminist scholars launched this incredibly powerful challenge against what they called mainstream sociology, a discipline that, they argued, had been built by men about the experiences of men and mostly for the benefit of men. Let's dig into what that powerful accusation really meant.
This critique just fundamentally reshaped the entire field. It started by asking a simple question: what about what happens inside the home? For decades, sociology had only cared about the public world of work and politics, basically ignoring the private world of family and housework, which was just dismissed as women's stuff. And this pointed to a much deeper problem. Theories that claimed to be about everyone were really just talking about men's lives. Feminist theory came in and argued that gender isn't just a personal detail, it's a core organizing principle of our whole society, just as fundamental as class. And crucially, it gave us the powerful idea of intersectionality, showing how things like our gender, our race, and our class all combine in complex ways to shape our lives and create unique kinds of inequality.
So where does all of this leave us? Well, it leaves us with the understanding that sociology isn't some book of final answers. It's a living, breathing, sometimes messy, and always evolving conversation about who we are and how we manage to live together.
The journey we've taken, from the classical architects trying to make sense of the industrial world, to the functionalists and interactionists, and then to the vital challenge from feminist thinkers, it all proves one thing. Theory is not static. It can't be. It has to adapt and change, because the society it's trying to explain is always changing.
And that brings us right up to today with one final big question. The world of Marx, Durkheim, and Weber is long gone. We live in a world they couldn't have even dreamed of. A world shaped by artificial intelligence, by instant global connection, by whole new social worlds built online. So the real question for us is, what comes next? What new glasses, what new theories will we need to invent to understand the challenges and the promises of the 21st century? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.